Hello, I'm Steven Roy Goodman, host of Higher Education Today, a production of the University of the District of Columbia. Welcome back to the education program that connects you to contemporary issues, people, and institutions involved in the world of higher education. Today we'll be talking about neuroscience and brain development. Dr. Michele Lemons is an assistant professor of biology at Assumption College in Massachusetts. Michele teaches the principles of neuroscience, general physiology, and human biology. Dr. Sarah Cavanagh is an assistant professor of psychology at Assumption College. Sarah teaches about the brain and behavior and is co-director of the Laboratory for Cognitive and Affective Science. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thanks. Pleasure to be here.
Well, thanks again for coming on. Michele, maybe if you can start, if you don't mind. What is neuroscience? It sounds like a fancy term.
Neuroscience refers to the study of the nervous system, which includes the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves. And it's a huge field. It includes topics like learning and memory, vision, pain, voluntary movement. It also includes diseases such as Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis. And it's a highly multidisciplinary topic with biologists, psychologists, chemists, physicists, and more tackling these issues.
So you have a brain in front of you. So what will you do when you're looking at the brain? You can't look inside every part of the brain, can you?
Well, perhaps Sarah should speak to that, yes.
So we have a lot of different techniques, and there's just as much interdisciplinary work being done at the level of the brain. And so work that I do and a lot of psychologists do look at the whole brain, and we have these new techniques called neuroimaging scanners that allow us to pick up on what areas of the brain are more active than other areas of the brain when people are, say, watching an emotional film clip or remembering sentences or things like that. And so we have this new ability to really look inside the living human brain as it's functioning.
Well, let's talk about emotion. That's interesting. So let's just say I'm seeing a sad movie. Can you show us on the brain what happens?
Sure.
I kind of like having the brain here. This is nice.
I mean, a lot of different things are going to happen when you're watching a sad movie clip. So you'll get activity back here in the visual cortex because you're watching. You'll get activity here in the temporal lobes because there's audio, and those are areas of the brain, this part of the brain over here that processes auditory information. And then there's a whole cluster of emotional and motivational structures here kind of in the center of the brain, and those, you're likely to see activity in those as well as you're becoming more sad.
So if I'm seeing a happy movie, a different part of the brain is going to light up?
That's an interesting question, and these emotional areas do tend to be critical for multiple emotions. You'll see slightly different brain activity, and there's different parts of the brain that are involved in reward. So if you were really, really happy, such as if you just took a drug like cocaine, or you're watching an erotic film clip or something like that, then you'd see activity in these reward areas. But it isn't that there's a sad piece of the brain and a happy piece of the brain. It's more that these areas are all working together.
No one's ever mentioned cocaine on our show before, but let's assume we're not promoting that.
Yes, yes.
And let's assume that what we're trying to do is encourage students to study neuroscience and brain development. So what would a student actually study when they're in your classes?
They'd study a lot right from the basics of, and maybe Michele could talk a little bit about how the nervous system accomplishes movement and sensation and things like that. And then in my classes we talk more, at an organism level, and we talk about things like how does the brain do language, how does the brain do emotion, things like that.
Yeah, and in the neuroscience class I teach, we cover a few of the many pathways that exist in our body. We cover one motor pathway and two sensory pathways that are traveling throughout the body and including the brain. And we cover these tracks, these pathways, and then the students get to practice, well, what were to happen if there was a stroke in this area of the brain? What would the symptoms be? How would that patient appear to you? And vice versa, if a patient appeared with these specific symptoms, where would you best guess that lesion is? And we also look at MRI scans, trying to identify internal structures. So I think our classes really complement one another.
So if a person had a stroke, you know that somewhere in the brain something isn't connecting perfectly.
So it depends on the extent of the stroke, but there is a way to, using the knowledge we have of the pathways that exist, knowing the symptoms, you can target the area, and of course you can use MRI to confirm your suspicions.
And what is an MRI doing?
That's Sarah's area of expertise.
So it's using really strong magnet, and then it pulses radio waves at the brain, and it changes the alignment of certain parts of the brain, and so we're able to pick up on when more blood flow goes to certain areas of the brain. And because the brain uses oxygen, more blood will go to the active areas, and so we can tell that. MRI can also give you a nice snapshot of all the different structures, and so you can actually see if someone had a stroke, the damage, you know, the loss in the brain. It would just look like a blurry spot, and you can tell that that is where someone has lost some of the material.
Well, this is interesting, but I guess the question that keeps at least affecting my brain right now is the issue of the fact that Assumption College is not a medical school as far as I know, and so you have undergraduate students working with you on the brain. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, very much so. Sarah and I both mentor students in the research labs. So we're in different buildings. I'm in the Testis Science Center, and we have dedicated faculty-student research space. And I use that space with my students. We're side by side at the lab bench, doing experiments together, troubleshooting together. We also have set up some collaborations with nearby University of Massachusetts Medical School, which is in the same city as us, just a few miles away. And this summer, in fact, I'm working there, and I'm bringing a student with me into a lab there. And you can imagine a large resource like that is wonderful to have, because we can capitalize on their focus on research and the equipment that comes along with that focus. So students are indeed doing genuine research. You know, we're doing experiments that we don't know how it will turn out. Well, you know, we are figuring it out as we go along, which is really exciting.
Well, that's interesting. So, but why wouldn't I do that at a medical school?
I think the advantage of doing it someplace like Assumption is that you have all those resources, and then we have a number of medical school resources, University of Massachusetts Medical School, but then a lot of faculty also collaborate. I collaborate with Tufts University and other areas in the other universities in the area, and so you have the big resources, but then we're a small liberal arts college with very small classes, and the students are working, like Michelle said, right next to faculty members rather than with a graduate student or something like that, which might occur at a big university. So you get the personal touch, but also the big resources. Which
is interesting, because I mean, it sounds like this is very detailed research that some students are doing with you.
Indeed, yes.
Well, could we talk a little bit about what your students are doing who aren't necessarily, let's say, doing research with you this summer? What would be some of the applications they would use for some of your classes? Would they work for different companies? How do they take your courses and apply them?
We have a number of internship opportunities, so we have relationships with places in the Worcester area, because Worcester is a big city, and so students sometimes go out and get experience outside of the faculty as well. And we recently set up a pipeline with the medical school where we're directly matching students with people in the psychiatry department doing research on everything from autism to bipolar disorder, and so they also have those opportunities.
Well, and speaking of bipolar disorder and other issues like that, I mean, mental issues are very serious issues, and they affect us all in some way, because even if we don't necessarily have mental issues, we all know people who do, or society can be affected by crazy people who do crazy things. What can we do as a society to kind of make it a little less taboo to study some of those things?
I think that having funding, you know, and making it a priority to have research funding at the governmental level and things like that, and also private funding in order to do this research. I feel like the stigma comes in not so much at the research level. There are a lot of people interested in studying these things, but rather, as you're kind of saying, at the societal level, that there's a lot of fear and a lot of misunderstanding about mental illness. And trying to address some of that, I think, is really critical.
Well, you know, you think about the words normal. You know, what's normal? What's abnormal? So is there something about a brain that can be abnormal?
Well, I think there certainly can be, and I don't know, Michelle, if you want to talk a little bit about, in terms of like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease and neuropsychological.
Certainly, yes, we know that certain diseases have, for example, Parkinson's disease, there's a subset of neurons that, a specific cell type, that are dying, and the loss of those particular cells are causing the symptoms as we know it, Parkinson's disease. So yeah, that can be detected by MRI and other methods. So yeah, there's certainly certain diseases that make the brain look different, either because of cell death or any kind of necroses that might be happening.
But in terms of mental illness, so that is kind of a clear-cut case where you can see what's going on in the brain. Something like depression or schizophrenia, where someone's having hallucinations, it's a lot less clear. And I think also one thing that it doesn't get appreciated is that we're all in a continuum, and that we all, if you consider depression, we all get sad. We all have times when we're less motivated. And where you kind of put a cutoff and say this is depression, whereas this is just normal sadness, is a really complicated business. And it's even more complicated when you're at the level of the brain, because every brain can do sadness, you know, but what is it about the brains of depressed people, and this is a research area that I'm really interested in, that maybe puts them at risk for experiencing something as severe as depression?
Well, and can we experience depression or sadness on a group level? Can a brain absorb, perhaps, you know, I'm sad about something that happened 50 years ago or 100 years ago?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're very social creatures, and there's a whole field of social neuroscience, and people caring very much about what is the impact of social variables and, you know, people's brains on each other's brains, really. And so I think certainly there are people who care a lot about that. And one thing that comes to mind is emotional contagion, which is a term that refers to, if you think about being in a movie theater, and when it's a big crowded movie theater and you're a lot of people, you know, it's scarier or sadder than not. And people do seem to be impacted by each other's emotional states.
Well, we see that in sporting events, right? Mm-hmm. Where, you know, you see these crazy sporting events, right? Where thousands of people are there and people change their behavior. Mm-hmm. What's going on with their brains when that happens?
Mm-hmm. I think one thing that our brains are really good at is processing things really quickly, and so that we don't have to think that much about it. And so they get very automatic. If you think about driving a car, you know, you don't have to think, okay, now I'm, you know, doing the shift, now I'm turning the wheel. And so our brain very much picks up on cues, social cues, and then, you know, kind of goes into the appropriate behavior. And so that, I think, is a lot of what is going on in those circumstances, that we pick up on social cues, what is the appropriate behavior, and then not, without even thinking about it, change.
But then how does someone pick up on a social cue if they're not familiar with the society? So let's say somebody comes from another country, they decide to come in to watch the show right now, they're watching it and their social cues are different in country X than, let's say, the United States. How are they supposed to know those cues?
It's really hard, and I think that there's a whole, there's a lot of attention being paid to that in business in terms of, you know, what are the emotional cues, you know, and in terms of personal body space, and there's a lot of social conventions around things like that, and we're such a global culture now that there's a lot of education about, okay, these are the social cues of this culture, and this is how to behave appropriately. Because it's hard, because if you don't know the social cues, then you don't know what is the appropriate behavior.
So what do you recommend that your students do when they go to another place and, you know, they're brain students, right? What do they do?
I think that you can do some reading, you know, so if you were going to study abroad, say, in a very culture that's very foreign to you, you know, you could do some reading about, you know, social display rules, and it's kind of the term that's used in terms of the amount of eye contact, the amount of personal body space, and you could be conscious about trying to fit in.
Interesting, interesting. Well, let's get to Assumption. So back to Assumption, I assume there are international students who come to Assumption. How do you deal with them, and do any of them join your classes?
Yes, we have international students, and just like any student, they track whatever courses are of most interest to them. And for example, if a student were to come to me as a freshman saying, I'm really interested in this neuroscience thing, I think it's great, then Sarah and I could speak with that student and give them some you know, good advice on how to ultimately obtain these research internship opportunities that we spoke of earlier, so that they can set themselves up well to get these research opportunities, because these research opportunities are really necessary for them to be successful when leaving Assumption. They seem to be required for a lot of different professions. A lot of graduate schools now expect them. And even the neuroscience class that I teach, it's now in some schools for physical therapy and occupational therapy. This neuroscience class is becoming required as a prerequisite for some of these programs. So in talking to us, we could help give them this kind of advice so that they can be sure to get the courses they need to be successful when they leave.
Well, let's assume they do take those courses and they're successful in your courses, and let's say they go back to another country. What do other countries have the same kind of ability to do the neuroscience research that we do here?
Various countries are very different funding mechanisms, but there is lots of international groups of neuroscientists, and this is a great opportunity for the entire world of neuroscientists to come together. One particular group that comes to mind is the Society for Neuroscience, which has a lot of activities, one of which is hosting an annual neuroscience meeting every year. And it's the largest science meeting in the world. It's on average about 30,000 attendees come from across the world. So it's very international, it's very exciting. You can learn about cutting edge topics in this huge field because there are so many people coming. And in fact, I've taken several undergraduates with me to this meeting where they would present their findings that we were accumulating together in the research lab. So it's an excellent opportunity for them to be exposed to this international community and to meet other professional neuroscientists. That's interesting. Can we move this a little bit to the social aspect? So, because one of you teaches a course on love.
I teach a part of a course on love, so motivation and emotion is the general course, yeah, and we spend a week on love.
So what's the difference between like and love as it relates to the brain?
Probably love is a lot alike, and so the best evidence seems to indicate that when you have really rewarding experiences with someone over and over again over time, and they have to match certain age and appropriateness, that this seems to build and your brain seems to learn that this particular person is really rewarding, and voila.
But can I love an object? Can I love a movie? Can I love a city? Can I love a place as much as one loves a person?
Might be a little more of a philosophical question. I think that you can really like objects, but I think romantic love is a combination of that reward processing, but then also there, is your feelings of empathy, your feelings of attraction, your feelings that this person understands you on a level that other people don't. There's a lot in terms of similarity of how you approach the world, and when you add all those things together, I think is when it becomes this particular thing called love, and you probably can't have that for your iPhone, I guess.
Fair enough. I know some people really like their iPhones. In terms of moving beyond love, though, in terms of the social aspects of undergraduates who may not necessarily be in love with each other, but they like each other enough and they're taking your classes, what do you see them doing together where the commonalities are in terms of both of your fields? So maybe not every student is going to become a professor of biology or psychology, but where do you see the intersection of the students who are in both of your classes?
Well, we've both developed concentrations in our respective fields at Assumption, and so students can concentrate in neuroscience. So they can be a biology major with a neuroscience concentration or a psychology major with a neuroscience concentration. And they fulfill all the requirements for the bio or the psych, but then they take a lot of classes that are specialized. And what's nice about it, I think, is it's kind of collaborative. And so they take a number of Michele's classes, and they take a number of my classes, and some classes with some other professors that are related. So they work together a lot, and they have discussions with each other. And Michele and I, have discussions and work together, and so it's very interdisciplinary.
And I see that a lot in my class, where I will group my students such that I don't have a group of just bio majors. We mix it up. We have some bio majors, some psych majors in a group perhaps for a group project. And I think the way I tell them is you have these experts in your group. You know, some of you have a biology slant, some of you have a psychology background. Use that to your advantage. You know, collaborate, talk to one another, bring in aspects that maybe the other person doesn't know about. And I think that produces a more fruitful experience and a more lifelike experience, quite frankly, because that's what we do, we collaborate.
Well, speaking of collaboration, a lot of athletes say that they do better when they practice together.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have advice for people? Do you exercise the brain like you do 10 push-ups every morning? What do you do?
Well, the brain does appear to be kind of a use it or lose it organ, and it's always good to do activities, you know, to try new things, take new courses, things like that. I have a friend who is a neuropsychologist, and she says she studies a lot of people, you know, toward the end of life and the struggles that they have, you know, with things like dementia. And she says the best thing that you can do preventatively is get regular cardiovascular exercise. That even more important than, you know, doing Sudoku puzzles is getting blood flow pumping, you know, throughout your body into your brain.
But is there a value per se of going to the art museum regularly?
Of course.
But what happens? Like, so what happens when you do that?
Well, anything you do that's new, that's novel, is going to change your brain slightly. Every time you lay down a new memory, every time you learn a new skill to play the piano, things like that, what's happening is that the cells of the brain are kind of talking to each other and they're building new pathways. And so anything that you do that expands, you know, kind of your emotional horizons and your cognitive or thinking horizons is also going to strengthen those connections and be good for you, I think.
So then wouldn't we want to have people do new activities when they're older?
Yep, and in fact, there's a lot of evidence that that's a good idea for marriages as well. There's a number of research studies showing that that one of the best things you can do is do new things.
As opposed to new husbands or wives?
Things like, you know, go parasailing or something like that, because they're new when you're doing them together. And yeah, I think doing new things is great.
Interesting. Do you have a thought or two about that, Michelle?
Well, it's similar to an athlete who may be very coordinated, and people who do repetitive motions become better at it with practice. Practice makes perfect, and when they look at the scans of those individuals, the parts of the brain that are important for coordination sometimes are even larger. The cerebellum in particular can be larger than another area. So it really does speak to practicing, making new pathways, and keeping those pathways active really does pay off.
What about comedy? What about humor? Like, I happen to think I like comedians, maybe because I'm not that funny myself, but I appreciate comedy. But does my brain seek it? Do people's brains really want it?
Yeah, I think research in humor shows that it is rewarding, you know, much like anything that we've been talking about in terms of reward. Humor is really interesting because it has such a thinking level. You know, most things that are funny kind of lead you down a path to expect something to happen, and then they turn it on you. You know, whether it's a punchline or, you know, if it's slapstick, someone falls down, but then they're okay. And some people think that that's how humor evolved, that it's kind of a nature's all okay signal. That if you think about a group of people, you know, and someone falls down, everyone rushing to their aid and spending all that time and resources, you know, it's kind of a waste. But if someone laughs and then everyone else laughs, then everyone's like, oh, okay, everything's fine here.
Interesting. Any thought about humor from the biology side?
No, we're not funny people.
Well, fair enough. You're probably funny. And we've only got a few minutes left, but if you would spend a few seconds giving some advice to people who perhaps may never get to Assumption College, who are looking at the show today and saying, this is interesting, I've never really thought much about the brain. What are you recommending that I do? As a viewer, what should I do to kind of exercise my brain and use it to my fullest capacity?
Oh, so I was thinking of a student, like a high school student going into college. I would suggest that they do well in their base introductory level courses, because those are the building blocks upon which we build more complex classes like our neuroscience classes. So to do well in those classes, and then to reach out to your professors, have that, be active in class, participate, come and talk with us. We're very accessible, and we love to talk about what we do, so it's a treat. And I think that's a great way to be successful, is to do well in the class, but also go beyond the classroom, speak with the professors, engage outside the classroom.
And I think from a general public rather than student perspective, most of the things that are good for your brain are what are good for you in general. Regular sleep, good exercise, having good friends, knowing you have people to turn to in times of need or need support, good nutrition, using your brain, knowing new things, experiencing new activities. All of those are good for the person and they're good for the brain.
But what about if something is scary? So let's say there's a new activity, and skydiving is inherently scary, right? But some people tell me that it's really exciting.
Yeah. Part of that is the release of adrenaline and some other hormones because of your body is kind of in a fight or flight situation, but the rest of you knows that it's controlled, that it's safe, that you have experts near you, so you get kind of that physical rush without having the real panic. And so a lot of people do find those experiences very rewarding.
All right, and last question, and I think we're going to be out of time. The issue of music. Are there particular types of music that are better for brain development than others?
I wouldn't say particular types of music, but music definitely is something that's in every culture in the world. You see the activity in the reward centers of the brain. People find it rewarding. People can use music to increase their memory, so kids singing the ABCs, the song helps them remember. So music is great.
Fair enough. We'll leave it at that. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you would like additional information about Dr. Michele Lemons or Dr. Sarah Cavanagh, please visit assumption.edu. If you have comments or suggestions about higher education today, please send an email to our viewer mailbox at highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. Thank you for watching. We will continue to bring you quality discussions about important matters in today's college and university world. Please join me again for another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm Steven Roy Goodman, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.